No one expected the human touch to cure the alien princess. Her family was shocked the alien world of Sci-Fi was unlike any earthling had ever imagined. Towering crystalline spires pierced the skies, and the air shimmered with energy, alive with invisible currents that humans could never feel. The people of Sci-Fi were creatures of intellect, their minds sharp and their bodies enhanced by technologies far beyond what Earth could ever hope to achieve. Their society was advanced, but it was also deeply rooted in traditions that could not be questioned, especially when it came to matters of health. Princess Zyra, the crown heir to the throne of Zyphar, had always been in the public eye. Her beauty was unparalleled, her mind as sharp as a blade, and her strength was legendary among her people. Yet, despite all her gifts, she had fallen gravely ill. It wasn't just any sickness. It was a mysterious condition that no healer or technology on Zyphar could cure. She had been in a coma-like state for days, and the royal physicians were running out of ideas. As the sun set on the capital, casting long shadows over the pristine white towers, the royal court gathered in the grand medical hall. The air hummed with a mixture of hope and desperation. The chamber was filled with the most prominent doctors and scientists, all desperately working to revive the princess. "This is impossible," muttered one of the senior doctors, a large, green-skinned figure named Dr. Shorin. "We've used every available method, nanotech stimulants, psychic intervention, energy transfer protocols. None of them have worked." Another doctor, Alea, paced nervously. Her silver skin gleamed under the sterile lighting of the room. "What if it's something beyond science, something we can't measure or even comprehend? We've tried everything we know, and still, she remains unresponsive." The queen, a regal and commanding presence, stood by the glass chamber in which her daughter lay. Her sharp, angular features were lined with worry. Queen Lyra had always held strong convictions, but now, as her daughter's life hung in the balance, she found herself second-guessing everything she thought she knew. "We cannot let her die," the queen said firmly, though her voice cracked slightly. "Find anything at all that can help her." But despite the best efforts of the finest minds in the kingdom, Zyra's condition remained unchanged. Then an unexpected voice spoke up from the far side of the room. It was a human, a young man named Ethan, who had been part of the diplomatic delegation sent to Zyphar. He had no medical background, but he had seen the suffering the royal family was enduring. "Maybe I can help," he said quietly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Ethan had been part of the Earth mission to Zyphar, a simple envoy sent to discuss peace treaties and trade agreements. He wasn't anyone of great importance. His role had been ceremonial, mostly keeping out of the way and ensuring the humans didn't offend the Zyphar in any way. But now, he was offering something none of the experts had even considered. The queen raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly would you help?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, but he remained firm. "I may not have the advanced knowledge of your scientists or the technology you have here, but I come from a world where touch has meaning. Human touch can heal, comfort, and connect in ways that machines or psychic abilities cannot." The doctors exchanged confused glances. "Touch?" Dr. Shorin asked, his voice filled with skepticism. "You believe that touch, as primitive as that sounds, can cure a condition that we can't even diagnose?" Ethan nodded, unflinching. "Yes, I've seen it work before. It may sound simple, but the act of physical contact, of offering comfort through touch, can release something, an energy, a connection within a person. It's not something that can be measured, but I've seen it happen." Queen Lyra stepped forward, her gaze narrowed with suspicion. "You are suggesting that we abandon everything we know for some human superstition. I will not risk my daughter's life on something so primitive." Ethan's heart sank, but he pushed forward. "I don't expect you to understand, but what harm would it do to try? The worst that can happen is that nothing changes." The tension in the room was palpable. The princess lay still in her glass chamber, her face pale and her body motionless, as though she were simply sleeping. For a moment, all eyes were on the queen, who seemed torn between her pride and her desperate love for her daughter. After a long, agonizing silence, Queen Lyra finally spoke. "Very well," she said, her voice cold but resigned. "You may try. But if this proves to be a mistake, I will hold you accountable." Ethan nodded. "Understood." With that, the royal court stepped back, giving Ethan the space he needed. He walked toward the glass chamber where the princess lay, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. He wasn't a healer, he wasn't even a medical expert, but something about the situation felt wrong. Something told him that he had to try. Slowly, cautiously, Ethan placed his hand against the glass. He closed his eyes and focused on the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. As he did, he recalled the stories from his world, how human touch could communicate emotions, comfort pain, and sometimes even heal. He wasn't sure if it was possible with an alien, but he believed in the power of connection. Without saying another word, Ethan pressed his hand to the glass. It wasn't an ordinary touch, it was an offering. He wasn't just trying to help her physically, he was reaching out, hoping that something, some invisible bond, could form between them. For a long moment, nothing happened. The princess remained still, her breathing shallow. The room was silent, save for the quiet hum of medical equipment. Then something strange occurred. A faint glow began to emanate from the glass where his hand rested. At first, it was barely noticeable, like a shimmer of light. But as the seconds passed, the glow intensified, growing stronger, brighter. The energy that pulsed through the room was tangible, almost alive. The doctors stared in disbelief. Dr. Shorin took a hesitant step forward, his voice barely a whisper. What? What is happening? Ethan remained still, his hand pressed firmly against the glass, his focus unwavering. The glow around the princess grew more pronounced, and slowly her body seemed to respond. Her heart rate stabilized, and a faint color began to return to her cheeks. Queen Lyra, standing at the back of the room, felt her breath catch in her throat. Was it possible? Could this human, this seemingly ordinary creature, have somehow triggered a response that the finest minds of Sci-Fi could? The princess stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Then, as if waking from a deep sleep, she opened her eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice weak but full of wonder. "I feel something." Ethan's heart raced. "I'm Ethan, I'm here to help you." The room was filled with a stunned silence. The princess, who had been on the brink of death just moments before, was now awake, alive, and aware. Her family, her people, were in shock. They had never seen anything like this. The human touch, something so simple, so basic, had accomplished what their most advanced technologies could not. And in that moment, everything changed. As the days passed, the royal palace buzzed with activity. Word had spread quickly of Princess Zyra's miraculous recovery, and the entire kingdom seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. People gathered in the streets, whispering in awe and excitement about the human who had somehow managed to revive their beloved princess. But while the citizens marveled, the royal court was thrown into a state of confusion and fear. Zyra's health continued to improve, but with each passing hour, a new question seemed to emerge. Why had the human's touch worked when their most advanced technologies had failed? And more troubling, what did it mean for their society, where technology and intellect were everything? Queen Lyra paced back and forth in her chambers, her mind racing. She had never imagined that a simple touch could do what the finest science and medicine of Zyphar could not. Her daughter, who had been on the brink of death, was now awake, aware, and slowly regaining her strength. The color in Zyra's cheeks had returned, and her once frail body was growing stronger by the day. But the queen couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something unspoken, was happening. The healing hadn't just been physical, it had been emotional too. The human, Ethan, had come from a world where emotions and physical touch were central to life. But here, in the advanced society of Zyphar, touch was not a common practice. The people of Zyphar communicated telepathically, their minds linked in a network of shared thoughts and feelings. Touch in their culture was seen as unnecessary, even primitive. They had long ago evolved beyond the need for it, relying instead on technology and mental connection. But now, this human had shown them that touch, something so basic, could heal in ways they never understood. It was a mystery that seemed to threaten everything the queen held dear. The very foundation of their society, built on the power of intellect and technology, was being questioned by something as simple as human contact. Zyra, however, was not concerned with such questions. She sat by her window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Her mind was elsewhere, focused on something far more personal. Ethan's touch had done more than heal her body. It had stirred something deep within her, something she couldn't explain. As she sat there, lost in thought, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Alea, the royal physician who had been by her side during her illness. She entered the room quietly, her silver skin shimmering under the soft light of the chamber. "Your Highness, how are you feeling today?" Alea asked, her voice gentle but professional. Zyra turned to look at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Better than I have in days, I feel different, stronger. Alea nodded, her expression filled with concern. We've never seen anything like it. I've examined your vitals, and everything seems to be returning to normal, but I cannot explain how it happened. It's as if your body simply responded to his touch in ways no medical treatment could ever do. Zyra's thoughts drifted to Ethan, the human who had saved her. She hadn't seen him since the day he placed his hand on the glass chamber where she lay. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming desire to speak to him again, to understand what had happened between them. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something more, something she couldn't put into words. Ethan, Zyra whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Princess, Alea asked, her brow furrowing. Is something troubling you? Zyra blinked, snapping out of her thoughts. No, I'm fine, just lost in thought. Alea didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press the matter. The council has requested your presence. They wish to discuss your recovery and the human who... Well, they're eager to understand how this came to pass. Zyra sighed, standing up from her seat. Of course they are, she muttered under her breath. I'm sure they're all wondering how a human could do what their own technology couldn't. Alea gave her a sympathetic look. You know how they are, they fear what they don't understand. Zyra nodded, her mind already shifting to the upcoming meeting with the Royal Council. They had always been concerned with the preservation of Zyfar's traditions, and this development would certainly shake the foundations of their beliefs. But Zyra wasn't sure if she cared about their traditions anymore. Something had changed within her, something deep and undeniable. As she made her way to the council chamber, she couldn't help but feel a pull, a curiosity that she had never experienced before. She had to see Ethan again. She had to understand why his touch had affected her in ways that no one, not even her closest advisors, could explain. The council chamber was grand and imposing, a circular room with high ceilings and walls lined with holographic displays that showed the latest advancements in Zyfar's technology. As Zyra entered, the room fell silent. The council members, each a brilliant mind in their own right, sat around the large table, their eyes fixed on her. Your Highness, began Elder Carrix, the oldest member of the council. His voice was deep and commanding. We are relieved to see you awake and well. But we must know, how did this happen? What did the human do to cure you? Zyra took a deep breath, standing tall. I'm not sure how it happened, she said, her voice calm but firm. But I know that when Ethan touched me, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just my body healing, it was something deeper, something emotional. The council exchanged uneasy glances. Elder Carrix cleared his throat. Emotions, Your Highness, we are a people of intellect and reason. We do not rely on emotions to guide us. Zyra met his gaze, unflinching. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider that. Maybe our intellect has blinded us to something more powerful, something that we have forgotten over the centuries. The room was silent for a moment. The council members seemed unsure of how to respond to this unexpected challenge to their way of life. But before anyone could speak, the door to the chamber opened and a figure stepped inside. It was Ethan. He stood there, slightly hesitant but determined. His presence was a stark contrast to the advanced alien minds seated around the table. He was just a human after all. But as he walked in, Zyra felt something stir inside her, a recognition and understanding. This was the man who had saved her, who had shown her a different way of being. The council members looked at Ethan with suspicion, but Zyra spoke before anyone could voice their concerns. Ethan, she said, her voice steady, I want to thank you for everything. Ethan's face softened, his eyes meeting hers. It was nothing, he said quietly. I just did what I could. But Zyra could see the truth in his eyes. He had done more than just help her physically. He had shown her something that no Zyfar could ever teach her. And now, as she stood in front of the council, she knew she had to make a decision. Her kingdom, her people, her future. Everything was shifting in ways that no one, not even the royal family, could predict. Ethan, Zyra said, her voice firm, I need to understand what this means. I need to understand what it means for us, what it means for Zyfar. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. I don't have all the answers. But maybe it's time to stop looking for answers in technology and start looking for them in people. Maybe the true power lies in how we connect with each other. The room fell silent again, but this time there was no unease. There was only the weight of a decision that had to be made, a future that had to be chosen. And Zyra knew that whatever path she chose, it would no longer be the one her ancestors had walked. It would be something new, something led by the human touch. The royal palace was a place of beauty and power, but it had never felt as tense as it did in the days following Ethan's touch. Though Princess Zyra had recovered rapidly, and with no further sign of illness, the palace was not the place of celebration it should have been. Instead, the air was thick with questions, unanswered questions that no one seemed able to solve. Ethan had become an unwelcome presence in the halls of the palace. His touch, his presence, had done what nothing else could, and the people of Sci-Fi were beginning to fear what that might mean. Their entire culture was built on intellect, technology, and tradition. They had long believed that their evolution had made them superior to other species. But now it seemed that a human, a species they considered primitive, had done something their technology and minds could not. Zyra, however, was not afraid. She couldn't help but feel something deep inside her that had changed in those moments when Ethan had touched her. It was as if something within her had been awakened. And it wasn't just her body that had healed. Her mind, her heart, felt different as well. She had come to a conclusion that was difficult to voice, even to herself. That evening, Zyra wandered the palace gardens, lost in thought. The cool air carried the scent of alien flowers, their petals glowing softly in the dimming light. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she had to find something, some answer, some clarity. She needed to understand what Ethan had done to her and why it had affected her so deeply. As she walked deeper into the garden, she felt a presence behind her. She turned and saw Ethan standing there, as if he had been waiting for her. His simple appearance in contrast to the regal surroundings of the palace only seemed to emphasize his foreignness. But to her, he was no longer just an outsider. He had become something else entirely. "I knew I'd find you here," Ethan said softly, his voice warm but hesitant. Zyra nodded, her gaze steady. "I couldn't stay in the palace any longer. It feels like everything is closing in on me." Ethan smiled, but it was a sad smile, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "I get it, I've been feeling the same way, but I didn't come here to make you feel trapped. I came because I want to help you understand." Zyra looked at him, her heart racing. "Understand what?" "Understand what happened between us," Ethan said, stepping closer. "I don't know what it means, but I know that when I touched you, something changed. Something beyond just healing your body. I think it's something that's been buried in both of us, something we've forgotten." Zyra took a deep breath, her thoughts swirling. She had spent so many days in confusion, trying to make sense of what Ethan's touch had done. Now, hearing him speak, it felt like he was saying the very things she had been feeling but couldn't articulate. "I feel it too," she whispered, "when you touched me." It was like my whole body woke up, but it was more than that. I felt something else, something that wasn't just physical, something emotional. Ethan nodded, his gaze sincere. "I don't have the answers, Zyra. I don't know how this works, but I think we have to explore it. We have to learn what this is together." Zyra looked at him, her heart pounding. She had never felt such a deep connection with anyone before, not even with her closest allies or family. It wasn't just gratitude for saving her life. It was something more, something that went beyond her understanding of their worlds. She didn't want to admit it, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt when she was near him. There was something about him that made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined. "Together?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's expression softened. "Yes, we can't do this alone. We're both part of this. Whatever it is, we need to figure it out together." Zyra was silent for a moment, contemplating his words. She had always prided herself on being the leader, the one who could handle anything on her own. But now, for the first time, she felt like she needed someone else. Someone who didn't belong to her world, but who had still managed to do something unimaginable, something that had changed everything. "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "I've spent my whole life being trained to lead, to make decisions that affect my people, my kingdom. But now I feel lost." "You're not alone," Ethan said gently. "You're not the only one who's been affected by this. I don't understand why I felt the way I did when I touched you, but I know it was real, and I know it's something we both have to understand, together." Zyra took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, or what her people would think of this human who had done what their finest minds and technologies could not. But for the first time, she felt like she had a choice. A real choice, and it was a choice that she hadn't had before, the choice to follow her heart, not just her duty. "All right," she said, her voice steady. We'll figure this out together, but we can't do it here. The palace is too complicated. Too full of eyes that are watching us. Ethan agreed, a sense of relief washing over him. I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe it's time we leave this place for a while, somewhere we can be alone, away from all the expectations. Zyra nodded, her mind made up. She knew that her time in the palace, under the scrutiny of her people, was over for now. She needed space, space to understand what was happening between them, space to breathe without the constant weight of her royal duties. For once, she needed to put herself first. The next few days were filled with preparation. The council was hesitant, of course, when Zyra announced her decision to leave the palace. They didn't understand why she needed to go. But the queen, though reluctant, eventually gave her blessing, albeit with the condition that she would return soon. After all, the kingdom still needed its princess. But Zyra's mind was made up. She was not going to return as the princess everyone expected. She was going to return as herself, someone who had experienced something no one else in her world had ever experienced. And maybe, just maybe, that would change everything. On the day they left, Zyra and Ethan stood together in the courtyard of the palace. The guards who had once watched her every move now seemed distant, as though they no longer recognized the princess they had sworn to protect. They had no idea where she was going or why she had chosen this path. But Zyra didn't care. She was no longer their princess to control. She was a woman who had been touched by something deeper, something more profound than her royal duties. And as she left the palace with Ethan by her side, she knew that whatever lay ahead, it was something they would face together. As they left behind the grandeur of the palace and stepped into the unknown, Zyra couldn't help but wonder what the future held. But one thing was certain. She had never felt more alive. The journey away from the palace had been brief, yet the sense of freedom it brought was immense. Zyra and Ethan traveled in silence for much of the way, taking in the vast landscapes that stretched beyond the walls of the royal capital. It was a stark contrast to the carefully controlled, pristine environment of the palace. The world outside felt wild, untamed, and full of possibility. Zyra couldn't remember the last time she had felt so unburdened. For years, she had lived her life within the constraints of her royal duties, always expected to be perfect, to follow the rules, and to maintain the image of the ideal princess. But now, with every step away from the palace, she felt as though she was shedding layers of expectations, like a snake shedding its skin. She had made the decision to leave behind the world she had known, the world that had defined her, and step into something unknown, something beyond her understanding. With Ethan beside her, she felt a sense of excitement she hadn't known in years. Yet beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of unease. She couldn't help but wonder what the consequences of her actions would be. Would her family come after her? Would the council see her departure as a betrayal? These thoughts haunted her, but they were quickly overshadowed by the connection she felt with Ethan, a connection that grew stronger with each passing hour. They found a quiet place at the edge of a dense forest, a secluded area far from prying eyes. It was a perfect spot to reflect, to breathe, and to understand what had been happening between them. There was a small cabin there, abandoned long ago but still standing. It would serve as their temporary shelter. As they walked toward it, Zyra glanced back at the distant hills where the palace sat. The sight of it seemed so far away now, as though she were no longer tethered to it. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "Zyra," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts. "I'm glad we're here, but I can't help but feel like we're running away from something." Zyra stopped and turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "I'm not running away," she said firmly. "I'm choosing to live my life in a way I've never been allowed to. I've spent my whole life being someone else, someone my people want me to be. Now I'm choosing to be myself, to understand what this connection is, what it means." Ethan studied her for a moment, his brow furrowed. "But what if they come after us? What if they don't understand? You know your family won't just let you go." Zyra took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. "I know," she said softly. "But it's something I have to do. I can't keep living for everyone else. I have to know what's happening between us, Ethan. I have to understand why your touch healed me in ways no one else could. It's not just physical. I feel something more, and I think you do too." Ethan's gaze softened and he stepped closer to her. "I do," he said quietly. "I don't know what it is, but I feel it too. It's like something pulled me toward you, something I've never felt before." They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. Zyra could feel her heart race as Ethan moved even closer, his presence filling the space between them. It wasn't just his touch anymore, it was everything about him. The way he made her feel safe, understood, and alive. She had never experienced anything like it. But as much as she wanted to stay in this moment, she knew the reality of their situation couldn't be ignored. They couldn't hide forever. The kingdom, her family, the council, they would all be looking for her, and they would have questions. Questions that neither she nor Ethan had answers to. They spent the next few days in the cabin trying to make sense of everything. As they sat by a fire one evening, the shadows of the trees flickering on the walls, Zyra felt the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her once more. She had been raised to lead her people, to embody the ideals of her kingdom. But now, in this quiet place with Ethan, she was questioning everything. "I've never been free," Zyra admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Not truly, not until now, and I'm not sure if I can ever go back to being the person they want me to be." Ethan looked at her with compassion. "You don't have to go back, Zyra. You don't have to be anyone you don't want to be. The world doesn't have to define you. You get to choose who you are." His words stirred something deep within her. It was a thought she had never allowed herself to consider before. The possibility of being her own person, of choosing her own path, without the pressure of her royal title or the expectations of her people. She had always been taught that duty came first, that her desires were secondary to the needs of her kingdom. But now she realized how much she had sacrificed, how much of herself she had lost in the process. The days turned into weeks, and still no word came from the palace. No search parties, no messengers, nothing. It was as if the kingdom had forgotten about her, or worse, was simply waiting for her to return on her own. But Zyra couldn't return, not yet. Not until she understood the full extent of the connection she shared with Ethan and what it meant for her future. But then, one afternoon, while they were out exploring the forest, they heard the sound of approaching footsteps. They froze, instinctively looking at each other. There was no mistaking it, the unmistakable crunch of boots on the forest floor. Someone was coming. Zyra's heart raced, and she looked at Ethan with fear in her eyes. "They've found us," she whispered. Ethan's expression hardened. "We knew this would happen. We can't keep running forever." But Zyra wasn't ready to run anymore. She wasn't the frightened princess anymore. She had made a choice, and no matter what happened next, she was going to face it head-on. "They're here," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm not going back. Not without understanding what this is, what it means for both of us." The footsteps grew louder, and before long a group of soldiers emerged from the trees. They were led by a familiar figure, Commander Rilo, a trusted advisor to the queen. His face was stern, but there was a look of confusion in his eyes as he saw Zyra standing there, unafraid. "Princess Zyra," he said, bowing slightly. "We've been looking for you. The queen, she demands your return." Zyra took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "I will not return, Commander, not until I have answers. I've been healed in a way no one can explain. And until I understand why it happened, I won't go back to a life of lies and expectations. I need to know the truth." Commander Rilo's expression softened slightly, though he still looked troubled. "I don't understand, Princess. The kingdom needs you, your family needs you, your people." "My people will be fine," Zyra interrupted. "I need to find my own path. And I will not let anyone make me choose between my happiness and my duty." Rilo stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, he nodded, though his expression was filled with sorrow. "I can't stop you, Princess, but know this, you are the heart of this kingdom. Without you, many will suffer." "I know," Zyra said softly, "but I can't lead a kingdom that doesn't understand me. I need to find the truth first." With that, the soldiers turned and left, leaving Zyra and Ethan standing alone in the quiet forest. The weight of what had just happened sank in. The kingdom was in turmoil, and there would be no easy path back. But Zyra had made her choice. And for the first time, she felt like she was truly free. Zyra's world was changing. It wasn't just the forest around her that felt different. It was everything. The air, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the way the wind carried the scent of the earth. She had never felt so alive, so in tune with herself. For the first time, she felt the weight of her royal title lift from her shoulders. There was nothing but the sound of her breath, the rustling leaves, and the steady presence of Ethan by her side. But even in this peace, the looming reality of what they had left behind continued to press against them. Zyra knew that despite their quiet retreat, she couldn't escape forever. The kingdom was still hers to lead, and no matter how much she yearned for freedom, she understood that her absence had left a hole, one that couldn't remain unfilled for long. Ethan noticed the change in her mood as they walked through the dense woods. She had grown quieter in the past few days, her thoughts drifting back to the palace, back to the kingdom that she had once thought was her whole life. He could see the internal struggle she was fighting. She had never been one to run away from responsibility, but now that she had, it was harder than she had anticipated to let go of everything. "I know what you're thinking," Ethan said gently, breaking the silence between them. Zyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and sadness. "I can't stop thinking about Zyfar, about my people. I've abandoned them. I've abandoned my duty." Ethan gave her a sympathetic smile, his hand brushing hers briefly in reassurance. "You haven't abandoned anyone, you've just chosen to find yourself first, and that's something most people don't get the chance to do." Zyra shook her head slowly. "But what if my people need me? What if my absence causes them more harm than good?" "Your people will understand," Ethan said, his voice firm with the conviction of someone who believed in her strength. "They may not see it now, but when they understand what you've learned, what you've discovered, they will follow you. You don't need to lead by force, Zyra. You need to lead by the truth." She stopped in her tracks, staring at him for a long moment. Ethan's words were a lifeline, but she still felt the heavy burden of her responsibilities pulling at her heart. "What if I can't make them understand? What if they don't want to?" "Then we'll help them see," he replied simply. "We'll show them what we've learned together. We'll show them the power of human connection. It might take time, but they'll come to see that your leadership isn't about your bloodline. It's about the truth you stand for." Zyra took a deep breath, the words settling within her. She had spent her life trying to fit into a role she hadn't chosen. She had tried to be the perfect princess, the perfect leader. But now she realized that it wasn't perfection that her people needed, it was authenticity. And authenticity could only come when she was true to herself. The following days were filled with quiet reflection. Zyra and Ethan spent their time in the small cabin, learning more about each other and the bond that had developed between them. It wasn't just a bond of convenience or necessity. It was something deeper, something that neither of them fully understood. But as the days passed, it became clear that their connection was growing stronger, and with it, their understanding of the world around them. Zyra had never felt this kind of bond before. On Zyfar, relationships were built on intellect and shared experiences, but what she had with Ethan was different. It was raw, unspoken, and yet it felt more real than anything she had ever experienced. Every moment spent with him, whether it was sitting by the fire, talking about their pasts, or simply walking through the forest, felt like it was leading them to something greater. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Zyra turned to Ethan, her face serious. "Ethan, I need to go back." Ethan looked at her, surprised. "Back to Zyfar?" She nodded slowly. "I've been running from my responsibilities for too long. I can't do that anymore. My kingdom, my people. They need to know what happened. They need to understand what I've learned." Ethan stood up from where he had been sitting beside her, his expression thoughtful. "You're sure about this?" "I am," Zyra said, her voice steady. "I can't live in hiding forever. I've discovered something that has the potential to change everything for my people. I can't keep it to myself." Ethan didn't speak at first, and for a moment, Zyra worried that he might want her to stay. But then he stepped forward, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Then we'll go back together." Zyra looked up at him, gratitude swelling in her chest. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever happens, I'll need you by my side." Ethan smiled, a warm, reassuring smile. "You don't have to ask, I'm with you. Wherever this leads, I'm here." The next morning, they packed their things and made their way back toward Zyfar. The journey was long, and as they neared the capital, Zyra could feel her anxiety growing. She had no idea how her return would be received. Would the queen welcome her back? Would the council understand what she had learned? Would they accept Ethan, the human who had touched her, healed her, and changed her life? As they entered the city, Zyra felt like a stranger in her own home. The grand palace stood tall in front of her, a reminder of the life she had once known. She could hear the faint hum of activity in the streets, the sound of her people going about their daily lives, unaware of the shift that was about to come. They made their way through the city and entered the palace gates, where they were met by the royal guards. Zyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, her resolve unwavering. She was no longer the princess who had lived for others. She was the woman who had discovered the power of human touch, the strength of connection, and the truth of her own heart. The queen was waiting for them in the palace chambers, her stern face betraying nothing of her emotions. The moment Zyra entered the room, the queen's sharp gaze fell on her, and for a moment there was silence. Zyra took a deep breath. "Mother, I've learned something I cannot ignore. I have to share it with you, with all of Zyfar." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You returned to us after abandoning your duties, and now you wish to speak of what?" "I've learned the power of connection," Zyra said, her voice steady. "The power of something beyond our intellect and our technology. A power that we have forgotten, but that is fundamental to who we are. I've learned that healing isn't just about science. It's about the heart, the touch, the bond we share." The queen's expression softened slightly, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. "And you believe this? Human has taught you this?" Zyra nodded. "Yes, Ethan has shown me that there is more to us than just our minds. There is a force that we've ignored for too long, and it's time for us to embrace it." The room was silent for a long moment. Then the queen spoke, her voice low but resolute. "If this is truly what you believe, then you must show us all that this path is worth taking." Zyra looked at her mother, her heart heavy but hopeful. "I will, mother, I will show you. And I believe you will see that this is the future of Zyfar." And so, with Ethan by her side, Zyra stepped forward, ready to share her truth with her people. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She would not lead by force or tradition anymore. She would lead by the truth she had found within herself, and that truth would be enough.